Jada stepped into the bright morning sunlight and took a deep breath before unlocking the door of Rosie's diner. She smoothed her apron over her uniform and tugged at the long sleeves that hid a scar she never spoke about. The diner sat on the corner of Maple and 4th, a small building with red vinyl booths and a black and white checkered floor. Every morning, Jada pulled open the glass door, and the familiar tinkle of the bell welcomed her back. She smiled at the empty tables, imagining soon they would fill with people chatting over coffee and pancakes. As she wiped down the counter, Jada thought about yesterday's shift. She remembered how Mrs. Thompson, a regular with silver hair and gentle eyes, had complimented her cooking. That kindness made the ridicule a little easier to bear. A few customers had snickered at her arm, wondering aloud why she wore long sleeves. In the summer heat, Jada had felt the sting, but she carried on. Today, she promised herself, would be better. She glanced at the clock. 7:15. Soon the lunch crowd would arrive. Jada arranged menus on each booth, leaving out the specials. Bored that red homemade meatloaf and blueberry pancakes. She checked that the coffee machine was full, switched on the lights over the grill, and tested the fryer. Everything hummed quietly, ready for the rush. In a few minutes, Mr. Allen, the busboy, would arrive. Jada appreciated his steady work. He never asked questions about her scar. When Mr. Allen came in, Jada greeted him with a nod, returned the nod, and began stacking plates. Jada handed him a basket of clean silverware. Together, they moved through the diner, setting things in order. The bell rang again, and a young couple slipped into the booth by the window. Jada approached with a gentle smile, pulling out her order pad. "Good morning," she said. "What can I get for you today?" The woman looked at Jada's arm and frowned. Jada felt her heart tighten. She wrapped her fingers around the pad, hoping her own face did not betray her hurt. The man seated across seemed unaware of his partner's reaction, simply glanced. "At the menus, we'll have 2 coffees, the woman said flatly. "Black." "Coming right up," Jada answered, turning to pour steaming coffee into 2 mugs. Steam curled upward in lazy spirals. She carried the mugs back to the booth, careful not to spill a drop. The woman said nothing as Jada set the mugs on the table. The man gave a quick thanks, and Jada moved on. She paused at the counter and looked at her reflection in the mirrored wall. Her dark hair was pulled back neatly, her eyes bright. Yet the scar on her left forearm was a pale, rough line that ran from wrist to elbow. She kept it hidden under her sleeve as much as she could. The memory of how she got that scar was something she replayed often in her mind. 2 years ago, Jada had been cooking dinner for her little brother Marcus at home, was learning new recipes, experimenting with spices and sauces. That night she had tried searing chicken in a hot pan. The oil had splattered unexpectedly. 1 drop had landed on her arm, and the pain had been sharp and burning. Marcus had called for help, panicked. Neighbors came rushing in, splashing cold water on her arm, but the damage was done. The skin healed slowly, leaving that jagged mark behind. In the months afterward, Jada had felt ashamed. How could she have been so careless? She covered the arm and wore long sleeves, even under the summer sun. Now, Jada shook off the memory and refocused on the diner. A group of 4 men came in, laughing loudly. They slapped the counter and called for coffee and burgers.
"How?"
Jada smiled as she approached, menu in hand. As soon as she stepped closer, she felt their eyes on her arm. One of them smirked and whispered to his friend. Jada's cheeks warmed, but she served them without saying a word. She placed coffee mugs before them and took their order, for cheeseburgers, fries, and a round of iced teas. The men talked among themselves, occasionally glancing at her. Jada felt her hands tremble when she poured iced tea. Wanted to look away, hide under the counter, disappear. But she straightened her shoulders and continued. Behind the scenes, in the little office at the back, the owner, Rosie, watched the dining room through the pass-through window. Rosie was a stout woman with curly gray hair and a kindly face. She noticed the men's smirks and frowned. Later, after the lunch rush, she would pull Jada aside and ask if she was all right. For now, she trusted Jada to manage the tables. The lunch crowd bubbled around Jada, Teenagers from the high school came in wanting milkshakes and fries. Office workers on their lunch breaks filled the booths, chatting about reports and meetings. Jada moved from table to table, taking orders, refilling drinks, and delivering plates. Her feet ached, but her mind focused on each task. The laughter and chatter around her felt like a gentle roar. As the clock ticked toward 11:30, a hush fell over the diner when a Marine walked in. He wore his dress uniform, deep green trousers, crisp white shirt, medals gleaming under the bright lights. Jada glanced up from the counter as he approached. Her heart skipped a beat, though she did not know why at first. He seemed different. From the others, his face held calm determination. He scanned the room until his gaze settled on Jada. Jada felt a new sensation, hope. The Marine walked straight to her, tall and steady. She felt her pulse quicken as she wiped her hands on her apron. He stood at the counter and nodded once, respectfully. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "may I have a coffee, please?" "Black." Jada nodded, her voice catching. "Yes, sir, right away." She poured the coffee and set it before him. Their eyes met for a moment. He smiled a small, warm smile that seemed to reach his eyes. For a second, the scar flickered in her mind, and she pulled at her sleeves, then froze. The Marine rested his hand on the counter. He leaned forward slightly and asked, "Is that arm injured? May I see?" Jada's breath caught. She had never shown her scar to anyone who asked so gently. Everyone else treated it like a joke. But this Marine spoke quietly, politely. He did not laugh or stare cruelly. Jada lifted her sleeve slowly, revealing the pale, jagged line across her forearm. The scar was a thin ridge of skin, rough to the touch. She felt vulnerable, but the Marine watched without judgment. He nodded and said, "I know that scar. You're Jada from Second Kitchen, right? 2 years ago, there was an accident in Mosul. I helped carry you out." The words struck her like lightning. She stared at him, speechless. Memories she had tried to keep buried dusty tense. The roar of engines, the panic on faces flooded back. She remembered raw fear when the cooking oil had spilled in the makeshift field kitchen. She remembered soldiers rushing to help her, one of them steadying her broken arm and guiding her to safety. He had been there, she now realized, standing by her side in a faraway land. Jada's lips trembled. She remembered Marcus's tears, the distant hum of helicopters, the smell of dust and pain. She remembered the Marine's strong hands lifting her onto a stretcher. She remembered the look in his eyes, concern, respect, unwavering support. In that moment, she understood that her scar was not just a mark of pain. It was a symbol of survival, of courage, of a bond formed in hardship. Back in the diner, Jada felt tears sting her eyes. The mocking jokes of customers who did not know her story seemed foolish now. She straightened, gave a small nod to the Marine, and said quietly, "Yes, I remember." He reached across the counter and gently squeezed her hand. His smile was soft but proud. Jada realized she would never look at that scar the same way again. It was not something to hide. It was a part of her story, a story of strength, of help in her darkest hours, and of a friendship that crossed oceans. Jada took a steadying breath, pulled her sleeve back down, and turned to refill the Marine's cup. The diner around them seemed to melt away in that moment. She felt seen and valued. Her heart swelled with gratitude, and she carried that feeling through the rest of her shift. Little did she know, this encounter would change the way everyone in Rosie's diner saw her scarand, how she saw herself. The lunch rush was in full swing. Jada moved from table to table, her apron brushing against the edges of seats as she carried plates piled high with fries and burgers. The diner was alive with sound, the clatter of silverware, the hum of conversation, the steady hiss of the grill. Yet in the back of her mind, Jada could still hear the soft snicker that followed her every step. At table 5, 2 women leaned close together, their heads almost touching. One whispered something, and both of them glanced at Jada's arm as she poured coffee. Jada kept her smile in place but felt a hollow ache in her chest. She wanted to tell them to stop, to look away, but she said nothing. Instead, she took orders for club sandwiches and iced teas and hurried off before they could whisper again. A child in the booth next to them banged on the table, calling for ketchup. Jada knelt down, set the bottle before him, and ruffled his hair. He grinned up at her, showing a gap where his front tooth should be. "Thanks, miss," he said. Jada knelt on one knee, drawing in a shaky breath. "Welcome," she replied. She left him smiling, and for a moment, the laughter of the teasing women faded into the background. But as soon as she turned, the mocking voices returned. Jada's heart pounded. She remembered the days when she would not leave her house. The accident she had hidden away. She had felt that people might point or whisper that she was not whole. She thought she had moved past that fear, that her work at the diner would help her heal. Yet here she was again, fighting the same old battle. She refilled a coffee pot at the self-serve station and took a moment to steady herself. Steam rose in soft clouds around her. She pressed a hand to her chest and closed her eyes. She whispered to herself, "You are strong. You are enough." Words felt empty at first, but she repeated them until her breathing slowed. A bell rang behind her, and she turned to see 3 men in suits enter the diner. They carried briefcases and spoke quietly into their phones. Jada approached them with menus, and they barely looked up. One man glanced at her scar, his eyes lingering. For a moment, then darting away. Jada felt the old shame creep back into her mind like thorny vines. She forced herself to focus on the menus in her hand. "Good afternoon. Can I get you something to drink?" she asked in a steady voice. "Just water," one man said without looking. He tapped a finger on the table. Jada nodded, placed glasses of water before them, and turned away quickly. She moved on to the next table, but her thoughts stayed with those men. She wondered what they must think of her. Did they see a broken person? A careless young woman? She hated that they didn't know her. She hated that her scar told a story she did not want to share. The diner owner, Rosie, watched from the corner. She saw the flicker of hurt on Jada's face every time someone looked at that arm. Rosie had been in the restaurant business for decades. She knew when a customer crossed a line. After the morning rush, she would speak with Jada. For now, she waited, her eyes never leaving her young waitress. Jada carried on. She took an order from a family of 4 pancakes, scrambled, eggs, orange juice. The children were lively, asking questions about the diner and the old jukebox in the corner. They were curious and kind, and their mother smiled at Jada with warmth. The mother said, "You do a wonderful job, dear." "Thank you." Jada felt her cheeks warm. She thanked the family and walked away, a small spark of pride lighting inside her, but that spark was dimmed by the next table. 2 college students in bright t-shirts sat side by side. One nudged the other and pointed at Jada's forearm. Jada saw the gesture from the corner of her eye and quickly turned to write their order, 2 cheeseburgers and a milkshake. She kept her head down and excused herself from the table as soon as she could, her throat tight. She hurried into the small kitchen at the back. It was a cramped space, cement walls painted pale yellow with pots hanging overhead and a small window into the dining room. Jada dropped her apron and leaned against the counter. She closed her eyes as tears slipped down her cheeks. The hurt she thought she had let go bubbled up again, raw and fierce. She pressed her fingers against her lips to keep from crying out. A hand touched her shoulder and she jumped. Rosie stood behind her, calm but firm. "Jada," Rosie said softly. "Come with me." She led Jada into the office at the back, a tiny room with a desk, a coffee maker, and framed photos of the diner in its early days. Rosie closed the door and turned on a small fan. The hum filled the silence. "I saw what happened out there," Rosie said. "Some people don't understand. They see something different, and they think it's okay to laugh. But that's not okay." Rosie paused and looked at Jada with kind eyes. "You deserve respect. You deserve to feel safe here." Jada sniffed and wiped her cheeks. She shook her head. "They're just thinking aloud. I can't change what they think." Her voice was small. Rosie crossed the room and put a hand on Jada's shoulder. "Maybe not," she said. "But I can change how they act. If anyone is rude, I'll ask them to leave. You don't have to face that alone." Jada blinked, confusion and relief mixing in her chest. "Really? she whispered. Of course, Rosie said with a smile. I've seen better cooks than you on their knees. We're the heart of this place. Don't let a few foolish words change that. Jada closed her eyes and nodded, letting Rosie's words sink in. She took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. The office fan ticked softly as she fought to find the courage to go back out. When she stepped back into the diner, she saw Rosie speaking quietly to the group of men at table 2. The men looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Rosie's back was to Jada, but she could tell the owner was not pleased. Then Rosie turned and caught Jada's eye.
Ow.
She gave a small thumbs up. Jada lifted her chin and approached table 2. The men, 3 of them, looked up as she set down fresh plates. Their eyes flickered to her arm, but Rosie stood behind them now, arms crossed. One man cleared his throat. Sorry about earlier, he said to Jada. We didn't mean anything disrespectful. Jada nodded, her voice steady. She walked away, head held high. The rest of the afternoon, she noticed fewer stares and heard fewer whispers. When someone did look her way, they seemed to hesitate, as if remembering Rosie's watchful presence. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Jada refilled coffee, cleared tables, and took orders without her heart racing. When the dinner hour arrived, Mr. Allen began bussing tables. The light had changed to golden as the sun lowered in the sky. The diner glowed softly under the hanging lamps. At the end of her shift, Jada collected her tips and folded her apron.
Hey.
Rosie met her at the pass-through window. You did great today, she said quietly. I'm proud of you. Jada's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different tears of relief and gratitude. She nodded, unable to find her voice at first. Finally, she whispered, Thank you, Rosie. Outside, the air was cool, and Jada could hear children playing down the street. She rolled up her sleeve, letting the scar rest in plain sight for the first time that day. It did not scare her anymore. It was part of who she was, part of her story, part of her strength. Jada locked the diner door behind her and took a deep breath of evening air. She thought about the Marine who had recognized her scar and the owner who had shielded her from cruelty. She felt a quiet power inside, a sense that she would never slip back into fear again. As she walked home under the fading light, Jada raised her arm and looked at the scar. It gleamed softly in the dusk. She smiled. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would show it without shame. And if someone dared to mock her again, she knew she would stand tall because her story was not about a scar. It was about survival, kindness, and the courage to keep going. The diner felt different after the Marine spoke. Jada stood still, her heart pounding in her chest, as she slowly rolled up the sleeve of her uniform. She could feel every eye in the room on her arm. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The hiss of the fryer, the clink of silverware, and the low hum of conversation all faded away. All that remained was the Marine's steady gaze and the jagged line on her skin. Corporal Harris watched her carefully. His uniform was spotless, and the medals on his chest caught the light above the counter. He did not smile or laugh. Nodded, as if he had found something he had been looking for.
Addis?
Breath caught in her throat. She remembered the moment he had lifted her onto the stretcher, his strong arms holding her like she was precious glass. She remembered his words then. Stay with us, kid. She had clung to that promise through pain and fear. Now, in the safe brightness of Rosie's diner, she felt a flood of memories. The time in the field kitchen felt distant, but also so close. She could almost smell the dust and hear the low drone of engines. She could feel the heat that had burned her arm. And she could see Corporal Harris rushing to help her before any of the other soldiers even knew what happened. He had been the first to reach her, the first to speak calmly and keep her from panicking. Jada took a shaky breath and met his eyes. Corporal Harris, she said, her voice low. I can't believe you remember me. He gave a small, respectful nod. How could I forget? He replied. His voice was steady, the same calm tone she remembered from that day. You were the bravest person I've ever met in a kitchen. Of all places, you stayed calm when others panicked. You helped me keep the rest of the team safe." Jada's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them away quickly. "I was so scared," she whispered. "The oil spilled so fast. I thought I would burn forever." Harris leaned forward, resting his forearms on the counter. "You did more than you know," he said gently. "You let us out of there. You told me where the fire was worst so I could bring the extinguisher. You kept talking to me so I could stay focused." She remembered that moment. She had felt so helpless, skin burning, her brother's voice echoing in her ears through the radio. "Jada, are you okay?" She had tried to answer, but only managed a whisper. Then she saw Harris's face above her, calm and sure. He told her she would be fine. He told her help was on the way. He talked to her about everything except the pain, and that had kept her alive. Jada reached out and gently touched the scar. The raised skin felt rough under her fingertips. Closed her eyes, letting the memory wash over her. She felt the tears come unbidden. Harris placed his hand over hers, not pulling away when she trembled. "You saved more than yourself that day," he said softly. "You saved everyone in that kitchen. You gave us hope when things got dark." A hush settled over the diner. The mocking group from earlier sat frozen, their plates in front of them, eyes wide. Even the teens at the back booths had stopped talking. Jada realized that no one dared whisper now. Harris's presence filled the room like a shield. Rosie stood behind Jada, her hands on her hips, protecting her employee and friend. Jada swallowed hard and opened her eyes. She wanted to run away, hide in the kitchen, but she stayed. She lifted her chin and met Harris's gaze again. "Thank you," she said. "For everything." Harris gave a small, warm smile. "Don't have to thank me," he said. "Go on, finish your shift. I'll be here until you're done." Jada nodded, her throat tight. She let her sleeve fall back into place, but this time she did not feel shame. She felt pride. She felt seen for something real, not just a scar, but the courage and strength behind it. As Jada walked away to refill a coffee pot, Rosie touched her arm gently. "Take your time," she whispered. "You did great." Jada managed a small smile before turning back to the busy diner. She poured coffee into a fresh mug and carried it to a table of two elderly men playing checkers by the window. They greeted her with friendly nods, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. She poured their coffee and watched them settle back into their game. It felt good to do her job, to focus on each table, each customer, each small kindness. The memory of the field kitchen stayed with her. She remembered Harris's steady presence amid chaos. She remembered how he had pressed a cool cloth to her arm and told her it would heal. She remembered the other soldiers crowding around, grateful that she was alive. And she remembered thinking, "I want to be as brave as that man." As the lunch hour edged toward afternoon, the diner quieted. Jada carried a stack of plates back to the kitchen and rinsed them at the sink. Mr. Allen leaned in the doorway, watching her. He offered a small smile and a nod. Jada returned the nod and turned back to her work. She rinsed each plate methodically, scrubbing away grease and crumbs. The steady rhythm soothed her mind. With each plate she washed, she thought about the scar on her arm and her story behind it. She thought about how afraid she had been and how someone else's calm strength had given her courage. She thought about how she could carry that strength forward in her own life. The kitchen door opened, and Rosie slipped in. She carried a tray of fresh lemonade glasses and set them on the counter. "For your break," she said. "Go on, Jada. Sit down for a few minutes." Jada hesitated, then set down her sponge. She wiped her hands on a towel and followed Rosie to a small table in the corner. The table had two mismatched chairs and a view of the parking lot outside. The sun shone through the window, making the dust motes dance in the air. Rosie poured 2 glasses of lemonade and slid one toward Jada. "Drink this," she said.
"What?"
"Need it." Jada picked up the glass and sipped. The lemony sweetness felt cool and refreshing. She let out a small sigh of relief. "Thank you," she said again. Rosie leaned back in her chair. "Look," she said, Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are. Those people out there, they don't know you. They've never seen you fight for your life. Never seen you at your worst or your best. They only see a mark on your arm. Jada nodded, sipping her lemonade. She thought about the two women who had whispered earlier, the men in suits, the college students. None of them knew her story. None of them knew that behind that scar was a tale of fear and bravery and survival. Rosie continued, "You have a story that matters. And now, thanks to Corporal Harris, people here know it. They will think twice before they mock you again." Jada smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I feel proud," she admitted. "I never thought I could feel proud of this scar." "You should," Rosie said firmly. "It's part of your journey. It's part of who you are." Jada finished her lemonade and set down the glass. She looked around the kitchen, at the pots and pans, and the little window into the dining room. She felt stronger, braver. She reached out and touched her arm again, feeling the scar with new respect. Rosie stood and patted Jada's shoulder. "Get back out there," she said with a grin. "I need you to keep this place running." Jada laughed softly. She stood up, smoothing her uniform. She opened the kitchen door and stepped back into the diner, where the afternoon light was softer and the customers seemed more at ease. A few heads turned to see her, but the looks were polite. No, even kind. Jada moved through the tables with steady grace. She laughed softly at a child's joke, refilled cups, and balanced plates of food. Each step she took felt lighter than before. She felt a sense of purpose, a sense that her life had meaning beyond that small scar. Later, after the shift ended and the last customer had left, Jada helped Rosie close up. They wiped tables, stacked chairs, and turned out lights. The diner grew quiet, and the only sound was the soft click of the lock on the front door. Rosie handed Jada her tips and a brown paper bag with a slice of apple pie. "For home," she said. Jada accepted the bag and tucked it into her apron pocket. She met Rosie's eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice strong. Rosie smiled. "You're welcome," she replied. "And remember, you carry more than a scar. You carry a story no one can take from you." Jada stepped out into the cool evening air, the scar on her arm hidden once more by her sleeve but shining brightly in her heart. She walked home under the stars, feeling the weight of her story give her wings. She knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she also knew she was ready for whatever came next. Jada finished wiping down the counter and glanced at the Marine still seated at the end of the bar. His polished shoes were neatly aligned under the stool, and his medals caught the soft glow of the diner lights. Watched her with kind eyes. Waiting, she took a breath and carried a fresh cup of coffee to his spot. Steam curled from the dark liquid as she set the mug down gently. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm. "May I sit with you for a moment?" Jada hesitated. All around her, the diner buzzed again with hungry customers, but Rosie's quiet nod from across the room gave her courage. She slid onto the stool beside him and folded her hands in her lap. "I'm sorry if I startled you earlier," he said. "My name is Harris. Corporal Harris." Jada nodded, feeling her heart flutter. "I know," she whispered. I wasn't sure if you really remembered me." Harris smiled, his eyes softening. "How could I forget the woman who kept a whole field kitchen from going up in flames? You were calm when everyone else panicked. You told me exactly where the fire was worst so I could put it out." She closed her eyes, that memory rushing back. The heat, the roar of the flames, the sound of wood crackling. But most of all, she remembered how he spoke to her then steady, sure, never letting her fear take over. She touched her forearm, tracing the scar under her sleeve, and felt its faint ridge. "I was scared," she admitted. "I thought I was going to burn. I thought I'd hurt Marcus so much by getting hurt myself." Harris reached out and covered her hand with his. His fingers were strong but gentle. "You did more than you know," he said. "You let us out. Told us where the worst flames were and where it was safe to step. Kept talking to me so I wouldn't lose focus." Jada looked into his eyes and saw honesty there. She remembered his voice echoing over the hum of engines, guiding her down the path to safety. She felt tears sting her eyes. "I remember how you held me," she said softly. "You told me I would be okay." Harris nodded. "I meant every word You were brave. You showed courage when it mattered most. Jada looked around the diner. The group of men who had whispered earlier sat quietly, their eyes fixed on her scar as if they could see her pass through it. Even the elderly couple playing checkers had paused. The room felt still. It felt safe. She took a steadying breath. I've hidden this for so long, she said, lifting her sleeve to show him the pale mark. I was ashamed of it. Harris gently squeezed her hand. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Scar is proof that you survived. It's proof that you saved lives. A hush settled over the diner. Rosie hovered behind the counter, her mouth curved in a proud smile. Jada felt warmth rise in her chest, stronger and brighter than any heat she had felt in that field kitchen. She lowered her sleeve, but this time she did not feel shame. She felt honor. Harris stood and offered his hand. Let me walk you back to your shift, he said, his tone respectful. Jada took his hand and stood. Together, they walked past the tables. Some customers whispered, pointed, but their voices were hushed now, curious instead of cruel. At a corner table, an older man raised his coffee mug in a silent salute. At another booth, a little girl waved. Jada smiled shyly and waved back. She felt like she belonged, like she was part of something bigger. The sting of teasing had vanished, replaced by a gentle glow of respect. They reached Jada's section, and she took a deep breath. I should get back to work, she said. Thank you, Corporal Harris, for everything. Harris lifted his coffee in a mock toast. Any time, he said. I'll be around tomorrow if you need anything. Jada nodded. She turned to refill a customer's iced tea, her movements steady. Every step felt light. She watched Harris from the corner of her eye as she refilled sugar bowls and handed out menus. He raised his voice to place another order, blending in. With the lunchtime crowd, after she brought the order, Jada slipped into the small kitchen in the back and leaned against the cool tile wall. The noise from the diner drifted in through the pass-through window plates, clinking, laughter, friendly chatter. Mr. Allen handed her a fresh towel without a word. Jada wiped her brow and let out a long breath. Rosie entered the kitchen a moment later, carrying a small plate of cookies. For my brave girl, she said, setting them on the counter. Jada's eyes lit up. Thank you, she said, and took a cookie. She bit into it and sighed as the sweet flavor filled her mouth. I never thought something so small could feel so big. Rosie leaned against the counter and crossed her arms. You deserve every crumb. You've carried yourself so well today. Jada shrugged lightly. I had help, Rosie smiled. We all need help sometimes. The mark on your arm is not the end of your story. It's just the beginning of a new one. Jada nodded, thinking of the scar, the Marine, Rosie's kindness, and the customers who now looked at her with new eyes. She straightened her uniform and dusted flour from her apron. I'm ready, she said. The kitchen door opened, and Jada stepped back out into the light of the diner. Harris was still there, talking with a group of soldiers at the counter. They were on leave, letting their uniforms rest and enjoying homemade pie. Harris caught her eye and waved. Jada waved back, her heart swelling, as Jada moved through the tables. Taking orders and delivering plates, she felt a calm joy. She laughed at a child's joke, complimented a customer's choice of blueberry pancakes, and helped a young man decide between the turkey club and the meatloaf. Every face, every laugh, every smile felt like a piece of healing. Later, when the last customer left and the sun dipped low in the sky, Jada helped Rosie wipe tables and stack chairs. Harris rose from his seat, gathering his jacket. He moved behind the counter to speak with Rosie. Jada listened as they talked about the diners, new menu ideas and plans for a small fundraiser to help local veterans. Her heart swelled at hearing their voices, together one voice familiar and steady, the other warm and encouraging. She realized that her diner, once just a job, had become a place of community and care. It was more than a workplace now. It was a haven, a place where scars were not hidden but honored. When everything was closed and the lights were dimmed, Rosie handed Jada a to-go cup of coffee and a slice of cherry pie. For your ride home, she said. Jada accepted the gifts, her hands trembling slightly. Thank you, she said again, though one word felt too small. Rosie smiled and squeezed her shoulder. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll make that scar. Jada nodded. She stepped out into the cool evening air, pie slice wrapped in paper, tucked in her apron pocket, coffee steaming in her hand. Harris stood by the diner steps, waiting. Let me walk you home, he offered. Jada looked at him, then at the scar on her arm beneath the sleeve. She lifted her chin and smiled. I'd like that, she said. They walked side by side down the quiet street lamps painting pools of light on the pavement. Jada felt safe, proud, and hopeful. Her scar, once a secret she hid, was now a sign of strength she would carry proudly. And she knew that wherever her path led, she would never walk it alone. ChatGPT said, Jada woke early the next morning to the sound of birds singing outside her window. The first light of dawn filtered through her curtains and painted soft stripes across her quilt. She stretched and sat up, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun. Yesterday's events played back in her mind, the Marine's recognition, Rosie's fierce protection, the hush that had fallen over the diner. She smiled and reached for her uniform, neatly hung on a chair. Today, she thought, would be a fresh start. By 7 o'clock, Jada was at Rosie's diner, her footsteps echoing in the empty dining room. She paused at the door and ran her hand over the counter's smooth surface. Everything looked the same. The red vinyl booths, the checkered floor, the specials board, but Jada saw it differently. This place was not just a building. It was a stage where her courage had shone, where she had learned to stand tall. Tied her apron, smoothed her hair into a neat ponytail, and rolled up her sleeves until the scar peeked out. For the first time, she did it on purpose. She didn't tug the fabric back into place. She let the scar show small and pale, a jagged line against her smooth skin. It felt strange at first, like wearing a new piece of jewelry, but it also felt honest. Rosie arrived moments later, carrying a box of fresh cinnamon rolls. She set the box on the counter and gave Jada a knowing look. Ready for today? She asked, her eyes shining. What? Jada nodded and took a roll. More than ever, she said, biting into the sweet pastry. Rosie laughed. It's good because we have a big crowd coming in today. She pointed to a flyer by the door. Community breakfast to honor our heroes Saturday, 9 a.m. Beneath the words were pictures of local veterans, soldiers in uniform, and a note that the diner would donate a portion of its proceeds. Jada's heart skipped. She had not known about the breakfast event. She picked up the flyer and read the details. Rosie had organized it to give back to those who served on, to thank Harris and his fellow Marines. Tears came into Jada's eyes. She folded the flyer carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket. Will you help me? Rosie asked softly. Jada looked up. Of course, she said without hesitation. All morning, Jada and Rosie prepared the diner for the special breakfast. They rearranged tables to make space for a small stage at the front, where a podium and microphones stood waiting. Rosie decorated with red, white, and blue streamers, while Jada baked extra batches of cinnamon rolls and coffee cake in the kitchen. The sweet smell of cinnamon and sugar filled the air, mingling with the rich aroma of coffee brewing on the stovetop. At 8:30, the first guests arrived. Veterans in dress uniforms stepped through the door, some leaning on canes, others walking with steady pride. Families followed, children clutching handmade cards and flowers. Jada greeted each person with a smile and a warm good morning. She carried trays of scrambled eggs, bacon, and pancakes to their tables, her movements calm and confident. When Harris walked in at 9 o'clock, Jada's heart fluttered. He wore his dress blues and carried a small bouquet of wildflowers. He stood in the doorway, looking around with quiet satisfaction. Jada approached him and took the flowers, arranging them in a glass vase on the podium. Thank you, she said softly. Harris nodded and smiled, his eyes bright. Rosie tapped the microphone and spoke into it, her voice clear. Welcome, everyone. Today we honor our local heroes and raise funds for the community center. Please join me in thanking those who served. The room erupted in applause as veterans rose to their feet. Jada stepped back and watched the applause wash over Harris and the other soldiers. She felt a surge of pride not just for him but for herself and the diner. This place had given her safety, respect, and a chance to show her true self. After the speeches, Jada moved among the tables, clearing plates and refilling coffee cups. People approached her, some offering thanks. "Thank you for helping us," one veteran said, shaking her hand. "It's my pleasure," Jada replied. "You deserve every bit of thanks." A little girl tugged on her apron. "Miss Jada, will you come hear my poem?" the girl asked shyly. Jada knelt beside her and smiled. The girl recited a simple poem about bravery and kindness, her words, sweet and earnest. When she finished, the room broke into applause. Jada felt tears prick her eyes. She patted the girl on the head and whispered, "That was beautiful." Later, during a quiet moment when the diner was nearly empty, Harris came to the counter. He leaned on it and watched Jada, a gentle smile on his face. "You did amazing today," he said. Jada wiped her hands on a towel. "We did it together," she corrected. He reached across the counter and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for everything," he said. "For showing me your scar, for helping me today, and for being you." Jada looked down at their joined hands. She felt the rough ridge under her fingertips and remembered the pain it once brought. But now it brought a deeper meaning, proof of survival, proof of friendships formed in fire and kindness shared. She met Harris's gaze and nodded. "You helped me more than you know," she said. He smiled and eased back. "I'll see you." "Tomorrow?" he asked. Jada grinned. "I'll be here." When the door closed behind the last guest, Jada and Rosie began cleaning up. They wiped tables, stacked chairs, and washed dishes until the diner gleamed under the overhead lights. Jada found herself humming a soft tune as she worked. Rosie handed her a to-go cup of coffee and a slice of coffee cake. Rosie said. Jada accepted the treats and unwrapped the cake. She took a bite and sighed happily. "Thank you," she said, "for the 100th time that day." Rosie patted her arm. "You earned it. Now go home and rest, Jada." As Jada stepped outside, the evening air felt cool and calm. She held her coffee and cake and let her eyes settle on the scar peeking from her sleeve. It did not feel like a secret any longer. It felt like a metal one she wore with honor. Harris stood on the sidewalk, his jacket slung over one shoulder. He waved and Jada waved back. She crossed the street and stopped in front of him. "Good night, Corporal," she said. He smiled and tipped an imaginary hat. "Good night, Jada." She turned toward home, each step light and sure. The street lamps cast long shadows, but she was not afraid. Her scar reminded her of where she came from and how far she had come. It reminded her of the Marine who saw her worth and the diner owner who protected her. It reminded her that kindness and courage could change everything. When she reached her front door, Jada paused and took a deep breath. She looked down at her arm, rolled up her sleeve, and traced the scar lightly with her fingertip. "You," she whispered to herself. Inside, she set her coffee and cake on the kitchen table and sat down. She closed her eyes and leaned back, letting gratitude wash over her. Tomorrow, she would wake and do it all again, serve customers, share smiles, and let her scar shine in the light of truth. And as she drifted to sleep that night, Jada knew that her story was only beginning. She had found her voice and her strength, and she would carry them forward, scar and all, into whatever new adventures lay ahead.